Today I'm going to be going over how to install an internal muffler in a snare drum. I'm going to be using my Pearl short fuse auxiliary snare as an example. Let's check how it sounds before. Now, clearly that sounds pretty bad. Step 1 of this process is of course removing the top rim, the top hoop. Usually you would want to go in a crisscross pattern like you would when putting the hoop on, otherwise you wind up with all of your tension on one side of the drum. I already had this head very loose because of how bad the resonance was. I wanted it dead. This is my way to deaden the sound even more. So I was able to get them off, get them finger loose, and then proceed to remove the head and the hoop. Now looking at the edge, it looked pretty okay. I've seen some complaints about this drum having pretty bad bearing edges when it comes from the factory, but personally I don't have any issue with it. There is one spot where you can tell there's been some putty applied, and it's been sanded back down, but honestly, for the quality of the drum, it's a less than $100 snare drum. It's not bad at all. I think it's pretty good. The second step of the process here is going to be figuring out where it can go. Now, this drum has equipment on every single spot. You have the throw off, you have the porthole, there's your open spot, then you have the snare catch and the badge on the other side. So, there's really only one place that this muffler can actually go. So once you've got your side selected, then you have to figure out how high it can go. Now, this is a tricky part because currently it has no tension. You have to figure out where it's going to fit while not under tension at all. Once I've got my idea roughly figured out, by bending it and seeing where it sits, I need to go in and find the right drill bit for this job. You want to find one that is a pretty tight fit through that hole. That one's a little too loose, so I go up one size. And that one has no play up and down. That's perfect. Or at least I thought it was at this point. And then you always pre-drill, so I have a much smaller one to get the hole started and make sure I don't have any enormous amount of wandering. And there are my 2 bits. Set the drum down, get it plugged in, chuck up the drill bit. Now, I've taken the drill bit before and pressed in a little indentation where I want to start, so my drill bit will not wander. It's hard to see in here, I'll show it in the second part, but I found my spot and went to drill. I realized with this drum, it was actually too small to stick the entire drill inside, so I had to be very careful, and I knew I was going to be going at an angle, but I had to work with what I had. Going back, if I were to do this again, I would have found the spot on the outside of the drum and gone from the outside in, which would have given me better straight holes. But in this case, it's my first time doing it. I really wasn't sure how to transfer the marks to the outside. So going slowly with my pre-drilling bit, I go through, check the spot, put in the next drill bit, and drill the larger hole. I take that one from the outside and try to right my course, try to point it the other direction, which really doesn't do much for me, but it made me feel better about what I was doing. Now it turns out my drill bit was still too small. The hole here was self-threading because of how tight a fit it was around those threads on the knob. I had to pull it back out, get a slightly larger bit once more, and go through again. Now the hole fits through and the knob can be snug against the snare drum, and the muffler is ready to go on for the first test. I take the little barrel nut, press it up against there, get it threaded on, trickier than it looked, pardon my hair. I tightened it a little bit, and I used the stick rolling across the rim to find out where I was getting pressure and how even it was. In retrospect, I could have put this lower because I didn't use very much of the threads at all. But this drum is never going to be not muffled, so I'm fine with that. Now I needed to find my second hole to keep it from rotating inside of the drum. You can see through my hair that I am using that small drill bit to start my hole. I'm giving myself an indentation, pressing it into the wood to give myself a point so that my drill bit will not wander. It's not as important the first time, but now, because those holes have to be a certain distance apart, it's very important to mark that second hole in relation to your first hole. Use the piece to make your marks. I line it up, drill it out, drill back from the other side, and I find out, even though I made those measurements, even though I set it with the piece, I still didn't drill it correctly. So I had to deal with that. I had the holes too far apart. I wound up drilling my top hole at an angle. I really should have just gone from the outside because those angles messed me up. Learn from my mistake there. Go ahead and if you have a small drum, just transfer the marks from the outside. Or install the bottom hole first and then drill your top hole using the bottom hole as a guide. My solution in the end was to take that hole and rotate the drill bit as I drilled to give myself a little bit of a chamfer on both sides. So I'd have some play, and now, at long last, installing the second part, it worked out. Clearly the drum sounds a lot better now. It's a lot more dry. It's a lot more muted. It'll work very nicely for the rock band setting I'm using it in. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, leave a comment.